Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the PB Political Podcast. This is episode 56. I'm Eshan Pokral.
And I'm Michael Boddicker.
And we apologize for not being active for the better about a month, really. We've just been settling back into the whole college thing. And now we're back in it now, and I think we're good to go again. And last episode we did was a preview of the first GOP debate. And let's just take a couple minutes here to mention the debate itself. So, Boddicker, what did you think of the 2024, the first GOP presidential debate?
Some takeaways. Chris Christie is going on the offensive pretty much no matter what, and that's obviously, he's affirmed that in the last, I think, 24 to 48 hours, that he's pretty much going to go on the offensive, whether Trump is there or not. He's gonna find them and track him down. It's like some Liam Neeson Taken type stuff. I will find you, and I will confront you. So that happened. Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson kind of stood there. They had a good time. Tim Scott surprisingly did a lot of standing there and just looking good. I think people want to hear more from him. Mike Pence had an interesting night. I think it was actually atypical Mike Pence. I think Mike Pence, it seemed like he really wanted to get out of that shell of him being kind of this nice guy that just never had an opinion on anything. And he really kind of got down in the mud with Vivek and Nikki Haley, which was shocking for me because I don't really see him like that. Vivek had an interesting night. I think he took the Trump route since Trump wasn't there. I think he took a lot of populist talking points, particularly on the EPA, climate change, Department of Education. I would say a lot of Trumpian stances there. Nikki Haley, I think Nikki Haley is taking the establishment route, not necessarily the neocon route, but kind of the upholding the neoliberal world order. Big proponent of U.S. diplomacy. She got in a huge argument with Vivek on foreign aid for like Israel, Ukraine. And I thought she made some good points there. It was really interesting. And then she really got into it with Mike Pence about abortion. I think Nikki Haley probably grasped the reality of that situation better than any Republican on stage did. And I think that's why she received such a bump in the polls. I think people realized that she made some really good points.
Yeah, I think I was a little surprised by, one, Mike Pence just absolutely, I guess he just hates Vivek Ramaswamy. He was going after him. I don't know what it was about Vivek that made Mike Pence so animated, but he was relentless. It was actually surprising to see. I was surprised to see every candidate attacking Vivek. At that point in the race, it looked like Vivek was coming up into the number 2 position. I think he's still around there. Polling has taken a little bit of a dip, but I would still think that if Trump is not the nominee, it'll be Vivek or Ron DeSantis moving forward. But I think that it's just earned media, the whole Ramaswamy campaign. He's been getting mentioned everywhere. He just pops up everywhere. I mean, even that debate, I thought it was going to be, we said it was going to be all, can DeSantis take the heat? He didn't take any heat. Vivek took all the heat, and I think he did an okay job. I think the problem with Vivek's debate performance, looking back at it, is that if you knew about Vivek and you kind of knew his policy, then you would kind of like his debate. But if you're like a newcomer to his style and the way he speaks and everything, I think there was definitely a little bit more of a negative reaction. And a lot of people think he won the debate. I think mainly that's because he was he had the most screen time and he spoke the most. I think that played a part. But I'm really interested to see what happens in this next debate, and hopefully in person in the October debate in Alabama. And also shout out to Doug Burgum for being there on a torn Achilles. I think he tore it the day before. So
was it his ACL?
Was it ACL? It was one of the two, Achilles, ACL, something like that.
Oh, and sorry, Ron DeSantis, I did not mention him. He was just kind of there as well. I think he just went there, said his thing, and that was it. He didn't really have to.
And I think that was a smart move for him. I mean, I personally, on a political view, don't really agree with Nikki Haley. I think what she did, though, it was effective. I don't agree with her comments on Israel and everything, but I think that her what she did was to get a bump in the polls, and she did that. So we're gonna see how it goes. And now in 2 weeks, in California, I believe the second debate, the Reagan Library, or the Nixon Library, Nixon, Reagan, one of the two. Anyways, so that's where we're at in the debate. We're going to keep updating y'all, pppolitical.com, pppolitical.al, all that. Now let's get into the main part of this episode, the World War One. We're going back to history here. Continue our series, the road to 2024. How history's brought us to where we are in this moment in the country. We're doing the World War One era. So we're taking y'all through Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, just shout out, and then into our favorite president, Woodrow Wilson. So let's go ahead and get into it. So William McKinley did win a second term, but he was capped about a couple hundred days into his term, and Teddy Roosevelt, now the vice president, he replaced, did he replace Fairbanks on the ticket? Who was the ticket for? I don't know who McKinley's vice president was, sorry. But
his first term,
whoever it was, Garrett Hobart. So he replaced Garrett Hobart on the ticket after Garrett Hobart either died or resigned. I think he died. There's a lot of contention with replacing or adding Roosevelt on the ticket. He's more of a liberal Republican. For the time, that was something that there was definitely a split in who they should have nominated. McKinley went with Roosevelt, vibrant guy, young guy, and then he got shot. So Teddy Roosevelt is now the president of the United States. He became the first president so this is after the election of 1900. So 1901 to 1904, Roosevelt's president. And we're actually going ahead and get into the 1904 election here. Again, Roosevelt basically served out McKinley's full term, and he also, in the 1904 election, won pretty easily. There wasn't much of a competition against him. He ran against a more of a conservative Democrat and a chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals, Alton B. Parker, which was interesting because this is another thing, like, you don't really see circuit court judges running for office. The clip you saw them back then, I guess. But Alton B. Parker was a nominee. Easy win for Roosevelt. Not really a big issue. William Jennings Bryan ran, or no, he almost ran, but he declined the nomination this time around. That being said, and another interesting point on the Democratic side, Henry G. Davis, a railroad magnate and businessman, was nominated for vice president at 80 years old. And until President Biden is officially, most likely, the Democratic nominee for president in 2024, he is the oldest man or woman to be nominated for vice president or president from a major party. 80 years old in the 1900s is kind of impressive, honestly. And that was mainly a fun. The hope was that Davis would fund the campaign a lot. He was a rich guy. That didn't happen. But yeah, pretty easy election for Roosevelt. He won in a landslide election, and Teddy Roosevelt became the first person to win re-election after becoming an elevated vice president. So congratulations to Teddy Roosevelt. Boddick, you want to take us through the Roosevelt administration just for a little bit?
I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, I would say a pretty effective president. I think that a lot of the stuff that he did, particularly on the environment, is something that, especially with national parks, he wasn't the first person to establish national parks. I think that was Grant, actually. Shout out Ulysses S. Grant, underrated leader.
Underrated.
Won a Nobel Peace Prize for helping negotiate the end of the Russo-Japanese War. We see with Roosevelt, I would say, a continuation of the McKinley era enforcement of the Monroe Doctrine, and obviously the Roosevelt Corollary, something that is studied a lot in American history courses and U.S. foreign policy courses. That is Roosevelt's kind of brainchild. The Square Deal, huge element of his domestic policy, regulation of railroads, food and drugs. I think the USDA is a remnant of Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. Obviously conservation. And he actually, after his, I would say, towards the end of his presidency, he moved further left. Theodore Roosevelt, I think, is the introductory, at least in American politics, the introductory person for a welfare state that actually has some sort of political power. Eugene Debs, obviously, I think he ran as early as 1900, the Socialist Party, but he never, he got almost 1 million votes, I think, in 1912, but he didn't really have any significant political power. Roosevelt, I think, is the brainchild of the modern welfare state, at least those thoughts in America, and especially with labor unions as well.
Yeah, I think Teddy Roosevelt. I think everybody has a pretty favorable opinion of him looking back. I think it's mainly because he's just a badass. I mean, like Teddy Roosevelt is one of the most American quote unquote presidents in our history. I think everybody likes him. Again, huge protectionist, conservatist on the environment, something that both sides of the aisle respect. Obviously, his hunting trips are legendary. You talked about his policy. I do want to ask you. So Roosevelt in 1904, he did pledge not to run for a third term. What do you think? 'Cause so Teddy Roosevelt. So the Constitution, I guess, now allows you to technically serve as president for 10 years. So if you guys don't know this, if you're a vice president and the president has to step down for whatever reason halfway through their term, you're able to fill in and still run for 2 terms now. So back then, you could have, obviously there was no term limits on the presidency, but Teddy Roosevelt, honestly, he probably would have won. I think he would have won a third term. He wouldn't have been, and he would have been president for about 12 years. What do you think? Do you think that? I don't know. What do you think about his decision to not run? I mean, he wanted to like respect the tradition, obviously. But what do you think about his decision not to run? And do you think that it would have actually benefited us in the long run?
I don't know. It confuses me, right? Because he says that was the reason for him not running, and then he decides to run again because he's angry at Taft in 1912, and basically is the reason we have Woodrow Wilson. So in that reason, I think I still am a little bit bitter towards Theodore Roosevelt because of that, because he is basically the main reason Woodrow Wilson is even known in American politics. So thank you, TR, for that. I really appreciate that. No, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I think if he runs for a third term, he wins. Obviously, he doesn't. And the Republican Party has a huge rift during Taft's presidency, but particularly in 1912, which is the whole reason that Theodore Roosevelt runs again and splits the Republican vote, and Woodrow Wilson wins the presidency. I think like 41 or 42% of the vote.
Yeah, and we're just gonna get straight into Wilson, but just want to mention because he does exist. Roosevelt wanted Elihu Root, his Secretary of State, to run for president after he decided to not run for a third term. That didn't happen because Root had poor health, so he turned to William Howard Taft. And Taft was a friend. It was a kind of a persuasion thing. Taft didn't really want to win. It seemed like he didn't want to run. I mean, maybe he didn't want to run, but he wasn't really looking for it. He easily won the nomination. I have a shout out in my notes to Robert M. LaFollette, the senator from Wisconsin, for having a cool hairstyle and also just being a really big figure in American politics at the time. He ran for that nomination. And he does come up a lot in American history for his work as a senator from Wisconsin. On the other side, William Jennings Bryan returns. This is his last run at presidency. I feel like it's a shame just for his stature as a candidate was always so big. His speeches were amazing, obviously, historically, but he just didn't have it. And I mean, this election cycle in 1908, the free silver idea wasn't even in the discourse at this point. So Bryan went a little bit more with the populist, rich versus poor, kind of a Bernie Sanders-esque, you could say, messaging, but it's messaging we've seen in the past, obviously. Taft won easily. This kind of ended Bryan's political career at the electoral level, and Republicans flooded the House of Representatives and the Senate. Taft won the electoral vote with 29 states carried, 321 electoral votes to William Jennings Bryan's 162. So this is the end of Bryan's electoral hunts, but just a little bit of appreciation for William Jennings Bryan for existing. And now we have Howard Taft for one term. I don't really know what there is much to talk about Taft, but
in terms of Taft, and I forgot to mention this under Theodore Roosevelt, the Panama Canal, that was a huge issue at the time.
I didn't even mention that. Yeah,
Panama Canal, commerce. France initially wanted. We talked about that in a previous episode. I think the presidency of, it may have been McKinley, or it may have even been Hayes, actually, the concept of the Panama Canal being shifting French construction to American construction, and how important that was. And I wish we would have gotten to talk more about Garfield, and Garfield would have been a really interesting
that
person
would
to
have been
talk
cool.
But obviously didn't have a long enough presidency to talk about his presidency.
Unlucky.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
But in terms of Taft, dollar diplomacy, that was really big, kind of changing from the Theodore Roosevelt big stick foreign policy to kind of influencing people with dollars and not guns. I think that was a really big shift from Taft, and whether you want to say it worked or not, that's up to you. But I think Taft is probably an underrated president. He just gets made fun of a lot because he's fat. Unfortunately for him. But all in all, I don't think Taft was a particular disappointment as a president. I mean, but clearly Theodore Roosevelt saw it differently than I did.
Yeah,
because he runs in 1912.
Oh yeah. So Taft was a little bit more conservative than Roosevelt would have liked. Keep in mind, after he left the office, he went to Africa for like a year, and they went on the Smithsonian Institute went on a huge hunt. I think they captured like 12,000 animals. It was crazy. Because he was an avid outdoorsman hunter, so he wasn't even here. But then 1912, the election of 1912, we have a three-way race really, but we gotta shout out my boy Eugene Debs for existing. Eugene Debs is the last candidate to run from prison, last major candidate to run from prison. We might have a return of that this year or in 2024, possibly, if former President Donald Trump is in jail at that time, but we'll see. But yeah, Woodrow Wilson, the Democratic governor of New Jersey, is on the ballot. Theodore Roosevelt's back with the progressive, also known as the Bull Moose Party, probably the coolest name for a party in American history. I mean, it's amazing. And William Howard Taft's here. Obviously, he's running for re-election. Roosevelt is upset that he's much more conservative than either he was or that like he thought he would have postured as. And then we have Eugene Debs from Indiana. So here we go. This is the election. I mean, just if you look at the raw total of votes, Roosevelt returning to the ballot just really screwed Taft over, and like this is probably the biggest third party, non-two-party spoiler candidate in history, even more than Ross Perot in 1992, just because of Roosevelt actually beat Taft. Taft won 8 electoral votes. Roosevelt carried more states than Taft. I think he had 88 electoral votes, 6 states, and he had 27% of the vote, the popular vote. Taft had 23%. He only carried 2 states, 8 electoral votes, but if you look at these percentages, Wilson's lowest percentages, I mean, Wilson won much more than half of the country with less than 49% of the electoral vote. The only state where he won like a lot of electoral votes was South Carolina, and that's because they used to have like strange laws around election, and Roosevelt and them weren't even on the ballot really. So, anyways, Wilson really won this election because of, I don't know, who do you blame? Do you blame Roosevelt or do you blame Taft for this one? Because one of the two would have won.
I think I blame both of them.
One of them would have won.
Getting into Taft a little bit more, I guess. Taft, I think it may have been Taft. In my opinion, it looks like it's Taft's social conservatism that alienates Roosevelt more than it is his actual economic conservatism. Like Taft brings 70 cases of antitrust under Sherman antitrust, which is the most famous one. He brings 70 in 4 years. Roosevelt brought 40 in 7 years. So Taft actually, in terms of economics, continuing the antitrust, trust buster, and even like the income tax, 16th Amendment, whatever your opinions are on the income tax, that's brought up during Taft's administration. I'd say that was pretty progressive for the time. And even the 17th Amendment, which, hot take, is my least favorite amendment, is also brought up during Taft's presidency, which leads to the direct election of senators. Both 16th and 17th Amendment take place, or they're ratified during Wilson's term. But these ideas are really brought forth during Taft. So I really think that the combination of Taft's, like, for example, we get onto Wilson a lot, like you and I do, about Wilson being particularly racist. And that's definitely true. But Taft also, like, he announced in his inaugural address that he wouldn't appoint African Americans to federal jobs, particularly where it would cause racial tension. Not great, to say the least. So I think that, Taft's certainly not the best in terms of racial equality. He removed a lot of black office holders in the South and made few appointments in the North. So
not great, not good at all. Not good.
Not good. So I think there are a lot of reasons for Roosevelt to be upset with Taft. It just seems a lot like it's some personal beef as well.
Yeah. I think,
But
yeah, this is the thing. I mean, I'm looking at the breakdown for the states. The most percentage William Taft got in a state was Utah, which I'm not going to speak on Utah's social leanings, but I think it makes sense. And with 37% of the vote. So he couldn't even break a majority. Teddy Roosevelt did break a majority in South Dakota as a third party. He also hit 40% in California, 41%, almost 42%. So I think, actually, I don't blame Taft because in the sense that if you're already president once, you're going to run for president again if you can. Like, I mean, look at President Biden. I mean, he's running for president again. He's 82. I mean, Senator Mitt Romney came out today, actually, when we're recording this, and just said that I don't want to run for a second term because I'd be in my mid-80s at the end of it, and I wouldn't be able to serve effectively. And that's a sitting senator saying that, while we have Senator Feinstein, Senator McConnell, President Biden, even President Trump, he's 77. I mean, there's a lot of people that are very old that are just kind of not cognizant of the fact that they're very old. So I think, all that to say that, I think Taft should have been forced. I don't even know if it's forced. They should have somehow found a way to get Taft to step aside. Maybe that means appointing him Chief Justice, which happens in the future anyways. He's the only president to do, he's the only person to serve as both. But, just like Taft just wasn't the compelling candidate, and he had nowhere near the charisma that Teddy Roosevelt had. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the most charismatic figures in American history. I mean, how old was he when he was president? He was in his 40s, wasn't he?
41, maybe 42.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so he died when he was 60 in 1919. Yep. So he was 41 when he
he
took
asked
the
to
office.
serve in World War I. Teddy Roosevelt was like, "Yeah, send me out there." I'm like, no.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he was a spry young fellow, and he was just more charismatic. Everybody loved him, and I think the social conservatism is what angered Roosevelt. Regardless, Wilson is the president now, so our favorite, Woodrow Wilson.
So to preface Wilson, I blame Roosevelt and Taft for bringing us the delight that is Woodrow Wilson.
Let's get into Wilson before we have to go. Let's do it. Let's do it.
How long do we have?
Like 10 minutes, right? You have to leave, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's condense it. So my biggest beef with Woodrow Wilson, outside of his social issues, is that he founded the Federal Reserve. I'm very free market, libertarian type of guy, so the Federal Reserve is probably the biggest. I feel like that's the biggest critique we have outside of the World War One. I mean, we're not like that. How much time do we have about the World War One? The way he dealt with
there are so many things to blame Wilson for. Like you could feasibly make the argument, and I think I have even in the past, that Wilson takes a lot of the blame for World War II.
Oh, absolutely.
Wilson's treatment of Germany after the Treaty of Versailles is a pretty direct cause of World War II.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
You're even like, how is Wilson going to negotiate for a League of Nations and not even get his own country to join? Like, you've got to be a pretty unremarkable fella to get to design an entire, kind of world organization, and you can't even convince your own people to join.
I would like to say that I still believe fully to this day that Woodrow Wilson only won re-election because he was almost a wartime president, and then he became a wartime president the next year after winning re-election by saying he kept us out of war. It's just like...
And then just got straight into the war.
And then got straight into the war, literally like the same year. It's ridiculous. I mean, and Charles Evans Hughes, one of Roosevelt's friends...
God rest his soul. He would have been. He would have changed the game.
Yeah, Charles Evans Hughes was actually like a really good friend of Teddy Roosevelt's. He actually thought about him being his successor, but decided against it for other reasons. But they were all with it because they did not like Woodrow Wilson, and that's always an interesting thought. Like if we had another president Hughes, I guess at this point, but that would have been this would have been the first president Hughes. Anyway,
Well, even look at the Espionage Act of 1917, the Sedition Act of 1918, anti-draft activists, the first Red Scare. Like, there's so much to just despise Wilson for.
He's just not a good president. I think, and
he even has a stroke towards the end of his term that his wife ran the country the last 2 years of his administration because he had no mental.
Yeah, and he was thinking about running for a third term at that point. He George Wallace us. He George and Lurleen Wallace us with that one. Anyways, yeah, I mean, he was governor for 2 years. We ran for president. I mean, we have no shortage of bad things to say. He gets ranked pretty highly. I don't know why that is. I don't know.
It must be falling though. As the 21st century's come around, I think new criticism of Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it must be like something about him navigating us through a war and not having fighting here. I don't know what it is. The Federal Reserve. I mean, I'm not even gonna the Federal Reserve. He founded the Federal Reserve. I mean, he did want to enhance the Antitrust Act. He didn't really do it, but he thought that he could try, which is cool, I guess. But I mean, he founded the FTC, kind of. I guess he did create the FTC.
Yeah, or even like Wilson, like with Irish and German Americans. Like Wilson literally thought that they were like, you know what, they're gonna help Ireland and Germany.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He hated German Americans and Irish Americans were very anti, and that's also part of like the whole I mean that as you get deeper into Wilson's term, you can see that or his terms that you can see that like some of the stuff he does, I wouldn't blame an Irish immigrant or German immigrant to be anti-Wilson.
Or what about the Committee on Public Information?
That's my favorite committee. The Committee on Public Information. Yeah, so not a great guy.
Prohibition.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about Prohibition. Yeah, Nixon, yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah, Prohibition. Hey, I'm 19, but you got Prohibition. I mean, I know you love Prohibition. The Volstead Act.
If they had IPAs during that time, I would have been in the streets too.
Yeah, there's some positive things. Of course, amendments aren't really a positive thing, but because the president, they can advocate for it. The 19th Amendment did pass during Nixon's time in office. Congratulations to President Nixon. Why am I saying Nixon? Wilson.
Richard Nixon.
My bad. I don't know why I keep saying Nixon. This is the third time. The 19th Amendment.
Yeah, he did. Women's suffrage.
The 19th Amendment did pass. He was very pro women's suffrage for the better. Despite all of this, like his stroke, almost at the end of his term, he still wanted to run for a third term. Isn't that fun? And it's something we kind of hear now. They were actually really interested, but the leaders of the Democratic Party, the puppet masters, they nominate James Cox. James Cox, I mean, he didn't. This is 1920, so we're not gonna get into it. But James Cox versus Warren Harding. Really, two really bad choices. The only notable thing about James Cox is that FDR is his running mate in this election. FDR is kind of a rising star at this point, I would say, in the Democratic Party. Calvin Coolidge, my favorite. I don't know if my favorite. One of my favorite presidents, Calvin Coolidge.
He's an underrated president.
I like Calvin Coolidge. Seems like an all right dude. He was Warren G. Harding's running mate, and I mean everyone was tired of Nixon. Of Wilson. Dude, what am I doing? I'm sorry, Richard Nixon.
That Nixon episode's going to be crazy with all the unnecessary Nixon hate, thinking he's Wilson.
Yeah, I know. I don't even dislike Nixon as much as Wilson. Nixon, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, let's not forget, by the way, that Wilson ignored the 1919 race riots across the country.
What it was that he probably thought he had a win with women's suffrage. He could just ignore everything else. Man. Wilson,
I don't know if he had functional brain cells at the time.
That's a good point. He actually might not.
Maybe I should blame Edith for that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. But yeah, that's Wilson. And then Wilson was so popular that Warren G. Harding, the Republican, won 404 votes and carried 37 states, including Tennessee. So he won a state in the Deep South because of Nixon. So that's interesting because I don't think Tennessee went red since. Let me look. Tennessee wasn't Republican until the last time Tennessee voted Republican was in the 1800s, and I'm still going back. I don't see it.
Yeah,
Tennessee had voted Republican in over 40 years. Dang. Okay. Anyways, probably before the Civil War, but Yeah. So Nixon, oh my God, what do I say Nixon for? Why am I saying Nixon?
You have a vendetta on Nixon today. Apparently.
I have nothing against Nixon other than the whole Watergate stuff. Anyways, Harding comes in. People, this is I guess Wilson was the only Democrat to get elected for a while, and at the presidential level.
Well, yeah, him and Grover Cleveland are the
Yeah.
only two between basically
The Civil War.
Johnson. Well, Johnson was a unity, so I wouldn't necessarily. I think Johnson was more. He was a Democrat while he was in the Senate, so I won't necessarily. That one's kind of 50-50, but basically between Grant and FDR, so
Yeah.
18 to 32, there are only two Democrats.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I
Woodrow
agree.
Wilson, who was a top 3 worst president, and Grover Cleveland, who was just kind of there.
Yeah, but I mean that's the pre-World. I mean, we went through World War I here, so because we didn't want to spend a whole other episode just dunking on Nixon or what is wrong on Wilson. But yeah, that's what we did basically. So yeah, that's the World War I episode / debate recap. Sorry, we're kind of going quick here. We have to leave. Unfortunately,
things to do, places to be. We're important people.
We're definitely.
What's our next episode? Was it 1928?
Our next episode is that's Al Smith, right? That's FDR Al Smith. It probably is that one.
No, that's Hoover.
Is that Hoover? Oh no. Okay, we'll do that. I have the FDR.
Maybe we can just put that as in the FDR.
Okay, years. I have that in the FDR.
Don't talk about my guy Alf Landon. What you know about Alf Landon?
The governor of Kansas. My brother.
Hearts of Iron 4 legend.
Really?
It's just funny.
He's in there?
Yeah, he's in there.
Oh, wow.
He is in there.
That's funny. Yeah, FDR years, and then that will be next week. We'll do a debate preview again for the second one the next week after that, because I think the next debate is on the 27th, so in 2 weeks. And yeah, we'll be more active. We've been out for a month, but we're back in it now. Back in the groove, I think.
We've been busy.
We've been busy. So yeah, thank you all for listening. Tell all your friends to... We got articles coming out all the time. If you live in Birmingham, Alabama, check out pppolitical.com for my special on-the-ground coverage of the Alabama House District 55 special election going on right now. It's been fun to get on the ground, meet the candidates. Broke a story about how Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin was actually endorsing in that race. Actually came out before the announcements came out. It was kind of cool to do some real reporting for a little bit. But yeah, y'all check it out. Y'all check out the Instagram, all that. As we start beefing up for the 2024 election, we got new work coming out soon, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, thank y'all for listening. I'm Eshan Pokerell.
And I'm Michael Monaker.
And goodbye.